David Stearns is leaving his position as president of baseball operations with the Milwaukee Brewers to head the same position with the high-spending New York Mets. The possibilities will be endless and the expectations will be sky high, but this video is not here to predict what he might do in the future and instead appreciate what he's done in the past. Before Stearns' arrival to the Milwaukee Brewers in 2016, the team kind of just existed. The club had reached the playoffs just twice in the last 31 seasons, with just 4 winning seasons to their credit since the turn of the century. After a few years working under Jeff Luhnow with the rebuilding Houston Astros, David Stearns accepted the job in Milwaukee as general manager. He was actually younger than the Brewers' star player Ryan Braun at the time of his hire. Since assuming the role, Stearns has helped Milwaukee turn into a true baseball city. Although they haven't won the big one, the Brewers are on pace for their 6th consecutive full season with a winning record and their 5th playoff berth in 8 seasons since his hire. If they win the NL Central this year, as it appears they will, it'll be their 3rd division crown since 2018, which would match the amount that they won from 1969 to 2016 altogether. But as most fans know, this club doesn't spend big. Since 2020, they've never been higher than 18th on the list of all MLB teams' payrolls. But they've built a perennial contender through draft capital and, more importantly, savvy trades. As the title suggests, here is the comprehensive trade history of the Milwaukee Brewers under the guise of David Stearns. Now, I am going to cheat a little bit here. Hey, no one ever said cheating was bad, including David Stearns' old bosses over at the Houston Astros. It's how I got my high school diploma, after all. This first trade goes all the way back to the 2015 trade deadline, which is before Stearns took over the reins in Milwaukee. The man in charge preceding him was Doug Melvin, who is actually still with the organization in an adversary role. After starting with a 5-17 month of April, the season was over before it really started for the 2015 team. With the ushering in of Craig Counsell mid-season, change was in the air as Milwaukee embraced a seller's market and found a suitable partner in the surprise contending Houston Astros. The Brewers, on pace for a 94-loss season, made 2-time All-Star center fielder Carlos Gomez available. After one weird failed trade where the club would have acquired an injured Zach Wheeler and Wilmer Flores, they managed to find something even better. Packaged with starting pitcher Mike Fiers, the Brewers sent the duo to Houston in exchange for a haul of prospects. Although he threw a no-hitter, Fiers pitched to an ERA above 4.5 in 3 seasons with Houston, while Gomez regressed considerably from his MVP caliber play in Milwaukee. He posted just a .277 on-base percentage and 72 OPS plus in his 2 seasons there before getting flipped again later on. Together, Gomez and Fiers combined for just 1.9 Fangraphs WAR in their Houston tenure combined. As for the Brewers, they acquired Brett Phillips, Domingo Santana, Adrian Hauser, and the marquee piece Josh Hader. Phillips has become a lovable journeyman and managed to post just a little under 1 win in his brief time with the Brewers. Domingo Santana broke out with a 30-homer campaign in 2017 and was a near 5-win player in Milwaukee. But the 2 biggest wins come in the 2 pitchers acquired here. Adrian Hauser is still pitching for the club to this day. While his seasons have had their highs and lows, he's logged over 500 innings for the Brewers and is a career 105 ERA plus arm, compiling 6 FWAR so far. Josh Hader obviously ascended to stardom very quickly, becoming the most elite closer in the game at one point. He notched 4 All-Star nods, 125 saves as a Brewer, over 300 innings with a whip under 0.9. This was a massive victory. Although Stearns didn't coordinate this trade, they have logged 19.2 Fangraphs WAR and counting in this swap, so it bears mentioning. And, as most of you know, Josh Hader will pop up again in this story, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. Stearns took over in late September of 2015, and heading into his first offseason, he absolutely crushed his first trade. Stearns looked to sell off Adam Lind, who was coming off a career year in Milwaukee, and he found a suitor in the up-and-coming Seattle Mariners. With a lineup boasting Robinson Cano and Nelson Cruz already, adding a bat like Lind was a huge move for Seattle's potent offense, and a deal was struck. To acquire him, all the Mariners had to do was ship off a trio of unranked teenage pitching prospects. 2 of the 3 didn't pan out like most of them, but the last one blossomed into a flamethrower we now know as Freddie Peralta. Although it took him a few years to rise through the ranks, Peralta made it to MLB in 2018 and has been with the Brewers ever since. Although he has battled some injuries, he's been a fantastic bonus piece to complement a sturdy rotation duo in Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns for years now. He's creeping up on 100 games started for the Brew Crew, racking up an All-Star nod, over 500 innings pitched, over 700 strikeouts, strikeouts, and 8 innings of one-run ball in his playoff career, and he still won't hit free agency until the end of 2025. He's already been worth 12 Fangraphs wins above replacement in Milwaukee as well. As for Adam Lind, he spent 1 season in Seattle and saw his OPS plus regress by 30 ticks in what became his second to last season as a big leaguer. He was worth negative WAR that year, making this swap another massive success for the Milwaukee Brewers. But the 2016 Brewers were still far away from contending and mostly had a quiet deadline in the season that followed. The biggest piece to go in their sell-off was longtime backstop Jonathan Lucroy, who was sent to the Texas Rangers in exchange for their 2012 first-round pick, outfielder Lewis Brinson. Other pieces were involved here, but Brinson was notable as he instantly became the #1 prospect in the Brewers system. Lucroy was exceptional down the stretch for Texas as they hurtled towards the playoffs, and Brinson never got things clicking with Milwaukee in 21 games during the season that followed. This could be perceived as a loss of a trade initially, but we'll get there. As the Brewers progressed towards winning baseball that offseason, Stearns continued swinging quiet deals that went on to pay huge dividends at minimal cost. One of the biggest slept-on trades he made as Brewers GM came in the offseason heading into 2017, where he flipped the team's closer, Tyler Thornburg, to the Boston Red Sox. He was coming off a career year with 13 saves and a 2.15 ERA, and Stearns decided to sell high. Unfortunately for Thornburg, he was diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome in 2017, an injury that has claimed the careers of many notable pitchers like Matt Harvey and Steven Strasburg. He was simply never the same guy. Milwaukee got a haul of prospects and journeymen once again. Mauricio Dubon was featured in this trade, but he would be traded again subsequently in 2019. The big win here was corner infielder Travis Shaw, also known as the mayor of Ding Dong City, which is a title he won in a very close election race if I recall correctly. He was initially perceived as nothing more than a league average bat and placeholder, but the Brew Crew got the absolute best out of him. He turned into a 30 home run player in back-to-back seasons. He did fall off harshly at the end, but he was essential to the ensuing success of the 2017 and 2018 teams, as he played nearly 300 games, clubbed 63 home runs with a 120 OPS plus, and was worth 8.5 Fangraphs wins above replacement. This looks even better compared to Thornburg's negative F4 in 2 seasons with the Red Sox, notching another W for Milwaukee. The 2017 Brewers were buyers for the first time at next year's deadline, and although they wouldn't make the playoffs in the end, falling 1 game short of the wild card, an 86-win season marked the first winning season under Stearns' guide in just his second year. Still, with work left to be done, the 2017 offseason was crucial for Milwaukee. Stearns grabbed headlines with the signing of Lorenzo Cain, basically the first big free agent signing of his tenure, but the far larger and more influential move came, you guessed it, via trade. Now, the 2017 Miami Marlins were doing that fun thing that they always do, where they build a roster full of superstar talent and then they act like Andy in Toy Story 2, where he drops the toy and says, "I'm done playing with you." They became the marquee sellers of that year's offseason with their prolific outfield trio and up-and-coming catcher. The Brewers got in on the bidding war with a splash, dealing multiple top 25 prospects in their system, including #1 overall prospect Lewis Brinson. This was all to acquire outfielder Christian Yelich, who had racked up a Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, All-Star nod, over 50 home runs, and over 70 steals in 5 years with Miami. In terms of the haul sent to Miami, things panned out pretty wonderfully for the Brewers. Lewis Brinson sadly became one of the biggest busts of the 2010s, hitting just .203 with a 55 OPS plus in parts of 4 seasons with the Marlins. Isan Diaz struggled mightily at the plate as well. Monte Harrison played just 40 games for the Fish, and while Jordan Yamamoto had a strong start to his career, he too was traded after just 90 innings with the Marlins. All in all, these 4 prospects were worth -6 Fangraphs wins in parts of 4 years for the Marlins. It doesn't get much worse than this. Oh wait, it does, because we haven't talked about what Christian Yelich did yet. Baseball fans know the story here. Milwaukee finally got the star bat they had been seeking since the ascension of Ryan Braun. Yelich won the 2017 National League Most Valuable Player Award, then finished runner-up in the season that followed. In 6 seasons with the Brewers, he smacked over 130 home runs, swiped over 100 bases, won 2 Silver Sluggers, and has been worth 22.7 F4, making this trade victory easily the biggest of Stearns' career with a near 30-win swing in 6 years. This trade quite literally changed the trajectory of the Milwaukee Brewers. The 2018 team was the culmination of this front office's hard work. Hader, Shaw, and Yelich finished top 5 on the team in wins above replacement, with key contributions from Freddie Peralta and Adrian Hauser down the stretch as well. Stearns also used the previously acquired Brett Phillips alongside reliever Jorge Lopez in another trade to bring in Mike Moustakas at the trade deadline. Moustakas was was solid in the second half for them, but became an all-star in the season that followed, with arguably his best offensive campaign where he clubbed 35 home runs in 2019. He was worth 3.7 Fangraphs wins above replacement in a season and a half, while Lopez and Phillips combined for half a win. Sneakily, another big win here for Stearns. The Brew Crew won 96 games in 2018, then they beat out the Chicago Cubs in Game 163 to clinch the division and their first playoff berth since 2011. They went on to sweep the Colorado Rockies in the National League Division Series. Do you guys remember when the 2018 Rockies made the NLDS? Crazy ass sport. Then they came within inches of a World Series berth before falling to an admittedly better team in the Los Angeles Dodgers in 7 games. Despite the bitter end, the season was a massive accomplishment and set the bar moving forward for Milwaukee. The 2019 Brewers were largely the same as the wildly successful team of the year prior, with a stepped up and stepped down contribution from various players. The biggest trades here were a pair of rental pitchers, which again were massive victories. Stearns took Mauricio Dubon, acquired in the aforementioned Travis Shaw deal, and shipped him to San Francisco in exchange for hulking lefty reliever Drew Pomeranz. He was nails out of a really good Brewers bullpen with a 2.39 ERA in 25 innings and 2 clutch shutout frames in the impending NL wildcard game. Dubon turned into a solid big leaguer. He was simply expendable at the time for a more necessary arm. Also, I'm pretty sure Giants fans aren't very fond of him after he made these comments this season, so yeah. Stearns also brought back old friend Jordan Lyles in a deal with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He sent unranked pitching prospect Cody Ponce in the deal, who tossed a little over 50 innings in his Bucks tenure, none of them particularly good. Lyles was shockingly good down the stretch for the Brewers, making 11 starts with a 2.45 ERA. We now know him as the Chad innings eater, but this was arguably the greatest stretch of his entire career. But this is just a good example of Stearns and company being able to find valuable innings on the market while not giving up too much in return. The 2019 Brewers would lose the wildcard game in disappointing fashion, and they watched another team that beat them go on to make the World Series for the second year in a row. Needing to retool a roster in flux, the front office got back to work with a headline-grabbing trade, as Stearns linked up with the San Diego Padres. On the cusp of contending with superstar talent, the Padres dealt for immediate defensive and rotation help. They acquired Trent Grisham and Zach Davies from Milwaukee. Coming off a career best year and 5 overall solid seasons, Davies became one of the best pitchers in the National League during the pandemic season. He acted as the co-ace of a playoff-bound Padres team alongside Dinelson Lamet. Was 2020 real? Did that actually happen? What is this? While the bigger win in the trade ended up being Trent Grisham, Davies was worth 1.4 FWAR in that year alone. Grisham was coming off a solid season for Milwaukee where he stepped up in the wake of an injured Lorenzo Cain, only to make the most infamous error in Brewers history in the wildcard game and then get shipped out unceremoniously. He's had his ups and downs offensively, but he's been easily one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball in his career. The Brewers' return doesn't trail far behind though. They got a pair of above-average seasons out of Luis Urias and turned Eric Lauer into a 20-start sub-4 ERA pitcher for those same 2 seasons. Although the two haven't panned out beyond 2022, even with Urias getting traded again this season, they combined for just under 9 FWAR, making this swap between contending teams an overall success, which in theory is what every trade should end up like. The 2020 Brewers did make the playoffs in an 8-team playoff bracket and posted maybe the most hilariously bad lineup in a playoff game that I've ever seen. They were of course swept by the Los Angeles Dodgers, who went on to win the World Series. This was now the 3rd year in a row that the team that eliminated the Brewers went on to make or win the World Series. Making the playoffs is always a good thing, but doing so with a sub-500 record signaled that there were obvious improvements that needed to be made with this team's lineup. When the signings of Colton Wong and Jackie Bradley Jr. had the club roughly in the same spot in early May of next year, Stearns made the gutsy move to make a very early trade still 3 months away from the trade deadline. He was dealing with the devil this time in the Tampa Bay Rays, a team that had built a reputation off of fleecing other teams in trades that they still uphold to this day. However, I do think the Brewers got the better end here, only slightly. With a surplus of pitching talent, Milwaukee dealt away promising relief arms in Drew Rasmussen and JP Feyereisen. The former became the prized possession of the Rays as they swiftly converted him into one of the best starting pitchers in the American League. He's already tossed 250 innings with a 2.70 ERA since 2021 and could have been Cy Young bound if not for some untimely injuries, much like the rest of the Rays rotation. JP Feyereisen was also great before suffering suffering a similar injury fate with a sparkling 1.48 ERA as a Tampa Bay Ray. Together, the two arms were worth a combined 6.7 FWAR. The Rays, in return, had no problem dealing away Willy Adames, whose production had steadily declined in reference to him saying he had trouble seeing the ball properly at Tropicana Field. Turns out, Adames was the catalyst that the Brewers needed, propelling the team to a 2021 division crown with his absurd play. He hit 20 home runs in 99 games with a 137 OPS plus, marking him as one of the best offensive shortstops in the game that season. He's been a stalwart for them ever since, with 75 home runs in just under 400 games and 10.5 Fangraphs WAR in parts of 3 seasons. This trade is technically a win for the Brewers, but I still view this one pretty evenly for both sides. Despite cruising from June to the end of the season with the division lead intact, the Brewers suffered a disappointing 4-game loss in that year's NLDS, once again watching the team that beat them advance to the World Series after the fact. While the team had an absolutely superb pitching staff, the offense had to be questioned at this point. Yelich had hit a noticeable decline, Kane's contract had turned into a disaster, and players like Eduardo Escobar and Avisel Garcia were set to depart in that year's free agency. Entering the 2022 season, the Brewers made decent fixes to help keep them in contention through July. Stearns signed Andrew McCutchen, he turned JBJ's awful contract into Hunter Renfroe somehow, and swung a midseason deal for Rowdy Tellez. But despite holding a 2-game division lead on August 1st, the front office didn't believe in this team to get the job done, and while they didn't commit fully to a sell-off, they certainly made some headline-grabbing rebuild moves. The most notable was obviously the dealing of struggling closer Josh Hader, selling low on the lefty flamethrower with his free agency still a season and a half away. And while many thought the prospects necessary to get the job done would be massive, it was in many aspects an underwhelming return from Milwaukee. First off, they received Dinelson Lamet, who they designated for assignment immediately. Like, why even do that? That's mean-spirited. They received Taylor Rogers, who was rough out of their bullpen before leaving that offseason. Esteury Ruiz was included in the deal, and while he played poorly, he'll come up again in just a second. The marquee piece here was starting pitching prospect Robert Gasser, who I believe will be a part of the team's rotation starting next season. This year in AAA, he's tossed 135 innings with an 11.0 strikeout per 9 rate and a 3.79 ERA. But as of right now, this package has been worth negative FWAR for the Brewers. On the flip side, Hader returned to form to help the Padres reach the NLCS last season and is likely headed for a big payday this coming offseason, much like the front office expected. The Brewers did finish with an 86-76 record to keep the stretch of winning baseball intact, but they fell short of a wildcard berth with their second place finish. The Brewers swiped Esteury Ruiz quietly in the aforementioned deal, and what he lacked offensively, he certainly tried to make up for with his blazing speed. Stearns was able to capitalize on that speed in a pretty significant way. Lost in the translation of a massive dozen-player, 3-team trade where the Braves essentially stole Sean Murphy from the A's were the Milwaukee Brewers. In dealing Esteury Ruiz to Oakland, they were able to acquire prospect Justin Yeager, reliever Joel Payamps, and slugging catcher William Contreras. The latter was coming off a 20-homer All-Star campaign and has quietly been the Brewers' best hitter this season in terms of OPS+, better than a resurgent Christian Yelich. Joel Payamps is having the best year of his career, logging over 60 innings as the team's second-best reliever behind Devin Williams. This was easily a deal that they were willing to make, already yielding nearly 5 Fangraphs win in their favor less than a year removed from the transaction. And that, to this point, is the insane trade history of the Milwaukee Brewers. That was a lot of talking, a lot of players, a lot of numbers referenced, and David Stearns leaves behind quite a legacy in Milwaukee as he transitions to the front office position in the New York Mets system. This trade history video was an absolute gauntlet to put together, so if you enjoyed it, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the Jolly Olive channel. I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to hit 100k subs by the end of the year. It's free, it's easy, it helps me out a ton, and I appreciate you guys. And if you stuck around this long, why don't you hear a word from today's sponsor, the DraftKings Sportsbook. I know we were just talking baseball for the last 15 minutes, but football season is back in full swing, and that's actually one of the sports I love to bet on, and I do so at the DraftKings Sportsbook. And right now, they have a code partnered up with my channel. If you use code OLIVE, O-L-I-V-E, you can bet $5 on any pregame wager and win $200 in bonus bets instantly. Spread all that money on some same-game parlays or multiple winner parlays. Pick a bunch of winners from Sunday's football action, and you have a shot at making your wallet a lot fatter at the end of the day. There's a lot of fun things going on with the DraftKings Sportsbook right now. There's end of the year awards for MLB as well. You can get some last minute bets in there before Mookie Betts or Ronald Acuna Jr. wins National League MVP. The possibilities are really endless, and any resources you might need for a gambling problem or addiction are listed down below as always. Thank you so much to DraftKings for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you guys next time.